There are moments in a man's life when reality fractures and the unconscious spills through. For Carl Gustav Jung, that fracture began on a quiet October afternoon in 1913 as he sat alone on a train bound for Schaffhausen. He was 38 years old, respected, married, a father of 5, on paper, a man at the peak of his career. But inside, he was unraveling. He had just broken away from Sigmund Freud, his mentor, his intellectual father, the man who once called Jung his crown prince. The split had been brutal, not just professional, but spiritual. Jung had walked away from the entire psychoanalytic world, and now found himself intellectually exiled, creatively blocked and deeply alone. He couldn't sleep. He felt pursued by something, a growing pressure inside his chest, a sense that his mind was no longer entirely his own. That's when the visions began. Sitting in that second-class train car, watching the Swiss countryside blur past, Jung saw something that wasn't there. A monstrous flood, not water but blood, sweeping across all of Europe. He blinked. The vision remained. Cities submerged, bridges shattered, bodies floating silently through red water. And then, nothing. Just the soft clatter of the train and the low murmur of other passengers reading newspapers. No one else saw it, but Jung couldn't unsee it. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't fantasy. It was something else. He gripped the edge of his seat, his breath shallow, and in that moment, something broke open inside him. He would later call it his confrontation with the unconscious. But he didn't know that yet. All he knew was that something had begun. Something vast and terrifying. When Jung stepped off the train, the visions didn't stop. They grew louder. Each day, he was flooded with images, floods, serpents, dead gods, ancient rituals, rivers of blood. Not dreams. He was awake, and they came without warning, at breakfast, in the garden, while playing with his children. He could no longer tell what belonged to the outside world and what belonged to the inside. His family watched him withdraw. His colleagues quietly distanced themselves. He stopped taking patients. He walked for hours alone through the forests near Lake Zurich, speaking aloud to no one or to someone he couldn't see. He tried to write it off as exhaustion, stress, maybe grief from his break with Freud, but even that explanation began to crumble. Because then, the voices came. At first, they whispered. Then they argued. Some warned him, others praised him. One voice accused him of being a murderer of the soul. Another said, "You must die to your reason and your ego. Only then can you understand." He wrote their words down in his journal, word for word, even as his hand trembled. And one night, after a particularly violent vision, he dropped the pen, stared at the page, and said aloud, "I think I've gone mad." He wasn't exaggerating, he wasn't poetic. He believed it. He wrote later, "Myself had fallen into pieces. I could not pull myself together. The madness was real. But as the terror deepened, so did something else. A strange clarity, because in the voices, the images, and the symbols, he began to notice meaning, patterns, stories. This wasn't random. This wasn't noise. It was structured, almost like it was trying to tell him something. And for the first time, Jung wondered, what if this madness wasn't an illness? What if it was a map, not the collapse of the mind, but a descent into something older, deeper, a place he would later call the collective unconscious? Jung no longer fought the visions. He followed them. Each morning he returned to his journal, transcribing the dialogues he'd had the night before. Conversations with gods, demons, ancestors, shadows. They came uninvited, but he began to treat them as guests. He cleared space at his desk, laid out his pens, and listened. He called this practice active imagination, a technique no psychologist had dared to try. Not observing the unconscious from a distance, but entering it, speaking to it, letting it speak back. He wrote these conversations in black ink, page after page, line after line. But eventually it wasn't enough. Words couldn't hold what he was seeing, so he began to paint. On thick parchment, using gouache and calligraphy ink, he drew mandalas, serpents, castles, suns, souls, cosmic battles. He wrote, "The years when I was pursuing the inner images were the most important of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this." To Jung, this wasn't madness, it was initiation, an alchemical transformation of the soul. And what he found inside wasn't theory, it was a world. After the river of blood, the world inside Jung would not fall quiet. Every night, more shapes emerged from the darkness. In one vision, he wandered across an endless desert beneath a sky split between light and shadow. From the sand rose a black serpent, hissing with the breath of instinct, and above it fluttered a white dove, trembling with spirit. He understood. The war was not only in the world, it was inside every human soul. Then came Elijah, an old prophet with eyes like burning glass, and beside him Salome, a young woman, blind yet radiant, whispering, "I love you." Jung was terrified. She was his anima, the feminine soul he had buried beneath intellect and control. And Elijah, the wise old man, became his guide. Together they led him down into the caves of his own mind, where he saw a body, still broken. It was Siegfried, the mythic hero, his pride, his reason, his former self. Jung buried that hero, and in doing so, something ancient awakened. From the dark rose Izdubar, a radiant Babylonian giant, a god of old myth, golden and full of power. But when Izdubar tried to walk into the world, he collapsed, crushed by the weight of modern thinking. Jung wept. He realized, even the gods must shrink to live within the human soul. And then, finally, came Philemon, a winged old man with the horns of a bull and the stillness of eternity. He looked at Jung with eyes that had seen through centuries and said, "You believed thoughts came from you, but they come through you." Philemon became Jung's bridge between madness and meaning, between the known and the eternal. He guided Jung not to escape but to integrate, to hold shadow and spirit, hero and monster, masculine and feminine, in oneself. And by the time the world went to war, Jung had survived his own. He emerged not destroyed, but transformed, a man who had met the gods within and lived to bring back the map. When Jung emerged from his descent, the world was burning. World War I had begun, the very flood he had seen in vision. Blood, chaos, collapse was now reality. But Jung was different. He hadn't just watched his inner world fall apart. He had mapped it. The figures he met, Philemon, Salome, Izdubar, never left him. They became his inner counsel, his compass, his source. The concepts born from his descent would go on to shape everything. The shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide. The anima and animus, the soul's inner opposite. The collective unconscious, the shared mythic layer beneath human experience. And the path of individuation, the journey to wholeness. But the Red Book itself, he kept it hidden. Too personal, too strange, too sacred. For over half a century it sat locked in a cabinet in his Zurich home. Scholars whispered about it, patients caught glimpses, but it remained unpublished, unseen, until 2009. Nearly 50 years after Jung's death, the book was finally released. Over 400 pages of illuminated manuscript, painted visions, dialogues with spirits, raw and unfiltered descent into psyche. And when the world saw it, they understood. Jung didn't theorize the unconscious. He entered it and left behind a journal. For the rest of us, the Red Book is not a textbook. It is not a diagnosis. It is a mirror and a challenge. It asks, what parts of yourself have you silenced? What gods have you buried? What truth still waits in the dark? Because Jung believed to become whole is not to be perfect, but to hold all that we are, light and shadow, without turning away. And so the story ends where it began, not in madness, but in meaning. Carl Jung's journey wasn't clean, it wasn't safe, it nearly broke him. But maybe that's the point. In a world obsessed with certainty, Jung dared to face the unknown, not just in theory, but inside himself. He spoke to the shadows, honored the myths, and came back with a truth most of us spend a lifetime avoiding, that what we fear in ourselves is often where our power lives. Jung didn't lose his mind. He surrendered to it and found something bigger. The Red Book isn't just his story. It's a reminder. There's a voice inside you too. Most of us silence it. Jung listened. If this story moves something in you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Let me know what part of Jung's descent hit hardest, and if you're ready to explore more minds like this, subscribe. There's more to uncover.